Hello, you're listening to Environmental Soup through the facilities of Trent Radio or on my Substack archive page, Environmental Soup Archives, or on YouTube. My name is Rob, and today I will talk about Bill 5 and how it could impact the holidays and mainly how it could impact reindeer, Santa's reindeer, and I'll talk about, if there's time, gifts. So I will get into it by talking about what Bill 5 is. It's legislation that has passed. It's called the Protect Ontario by Unleashing the Economy Act. And I have a submission from the Canadian Environmental Law Association, which I will look at specifically for the narrow definition of habitat. So the definition of habitat was changed to limit the definition of habitat to just a dwelling place and immediately around a dwelling place. Caribou, which are also reindeer, have an expansive range, and limiting the definition of habitat is problematic because it would limit the life cycle of caribou. And they're saying that the Canadian Environmental Law Association is saying that the new definition is a clear step backward from a more expansive definition of habitat. And its definition of habitat, they're saying that the definition of habitat under the Environmental Species Act is essential for timely, efficient, and effective operation of the legislation, including the current prohibition against destroying habitat of a species. And they're saying that the legislation fails to safeguard other types of critical habitat needed for a species' full range of life cycle needs. It's important to talk about this legislation with family as people gathering for the holidays, and many people are celebrating the Christmas holiday, and reindeer are integral to the tradition of Christmas. But you might be celebrating another holiday. There's also economic zones that the government is making. And economic zones override any law, or most of the laws in Ontario, and they could be placed anywhere and destroy habitat or endangered vocals potentially. There is a growing opposition to the destruction of environment, both at the federal and provincial level. And it doesn't benefit our relationships with other countries if we continue to disregard international obligations to protect 30% of natural spaces. And there are alternatives to mining in environmentally sensitive areas or doing resource extraction. I will look at the next item in the that I have. Oh, I should also mention that harassment has been eliminated from the environmental protections. I know the old Environmental Species at Risk Act, or Endangered Species at Risk Act. Yeah, that's concerning as well. And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was a lesson about bullying. I just wanted to throw that reference in there. Let's see, I will go to the next item. In the Globe and Mail, there was an article called Bill 5 could affect these 6 species in Ontario, conservationists say, by Evans Simonek and Scott Holland. One of them was the boreal caribou, and the designation of a special economic zone could be detrimental to boreal caribou, and they roam over 1,000 kilometers. Some impacts to them could be road building and other activities associated with mining, and they could have a cumulative effect on caribou and several other species. Now we'll go on to the next item, and this is from Ontario Nature, and it's in the impact on Bill 5 on threatened and endangered species from May 2025. There's a narrow definition of habitat in Bill 5, and caribou will be vulnerable to stress associated with development and natural resource extraction. And let's see, I'll go to the next. This is the Government of Canada, and it's about the caribou. There's no requirement in Ontario to have a species recovery plan, and caribou are listed as threatened in Ontario, and different species of caribou are listed as endangered. And it's a lot harder to become listed as endangered in Ontario. So this symbol of Christmas could be lost because of excessive resource extraction that doesn't consider the environmental impact that they are making. And did I highlight anything? It talks about there's apparently a registry of species at risk. The threats of caribou include habitat destruction and disturbance of humans, including the construction of roads and pipelines. Pipelines have been in the news recently, and the spread of agriculture and mining. And yeah, I will look up more of the animals that are at risk. There was an article in the Norway newspaper called How Canada is Driving Santa's Reindeer Towards Extinction. And this article is from 2017. So the problem of caribou damages to the caribou are not new, as evidenced by this article, but they will be made worse. And as I said, this article points out that caribou populations are endangered. There's habitat fragmentation is a huge concern, and it says caribou have to move deeper into the woods. There's roads and pipelines make roofs easier to catch caribou. And let's see. Yeah, this doesn't talk about Ontario as much, but it's there was a lot of it says since 2012, 667 oil wells for oil were drilled in caribou habitat in the Little Smoky Range alone, and 96% of caribou ranges within 500 meters of human development in that particular caribou range. And it says in 2012, the federal government released a draft caribou recovery strategy, and 65% of habitat in caribou ranges to be protected by disturbance. But they failed to update, as this article says, on caribou, and it's legally required under the Species at Risk Act. And I didn't highlight anything else in this article. And then there's another article talking about this relates more to Bill C-5, which is similar in nature to Bill 5, special projects are similar to economic zones, in that they weaken existing environmental legislation. And so this article is thinking critically about Coney's proposed conservation corridor in northwest BC. And the article is making the case that there really isn't a corridor, or the corridor is more for oil and natural gas pipelines. Let's see. And yeah, there's a heading, corridor. What corridor? The corridor probably has nothing to do with conservation. And that was the main argument of this article that came out in December 3rd, 2025. And then those Ontario's proposed critical for special economic zones leave powers dangerously unchecked by environmental defense. They're saying that the cabinet and premium cabinet could be unilaterally scrap or change any criteria standing in the way without the approval of MPPs. And let's see. And then those Eco Justice has demystifying Bill 5, how Doug Ford's ominous bill guts environmental protections. It said Bill 5 would remove recovery or ensuring the species is able to survive with a stable population as a goal. And then they're saying it's a threat to democracy. They're scapegoating the species and environment to distract from a trade war. And then I did find a report from the Auditor General, Value for Money Audit Protecting and Recovering Species at Risk, from November 2021. It says forestry, those on page 3, forestry operation on crown lands were exempted from the Endangered Species Act and the Protect, Support, and Recovery from COVID-19. Despite the Environment Ministry's determination that forestry rules could cause significant adverse effects on 12 endangered or threatened species, including the boreal caribou. And then it says the loss of habitat is one of the biggest threat to species at risk, including the boreal caribou. And then decline of species is connected to human development, and caribou have been documented to retreat north by 40 to 50% of their habitat, and they're also at risk of increased predation and disease related to habitat changes. And then there's no requirement to provide overall benefit to species. And this was from a couple of years ago. And there was a project, TheresaKnott Power Limited in 2009. They were building 1,800 kilometers of transmission lines north of Red Lake and Pickle Lake to connect 17 remote First Nation communities. The company had a permit to impact 4 species, including caribou. And in 2018, stakeholders raised concerns about environmental assessment for this project and the transmission lines routing through caribou habitat rather than alternative locations with less impact. And there wouldn't be a requirement to look at to do an environmental assessment to look at alternative sites that have lesser impacts with special economic zones. And that is a large concern. And let's see, I'm just checking on the time. Okay, so let's see. Oh, there's Woodland Caribou Conservation Plan. I don't think I have enough time to look at that. And I looked at that already. Okay, and so I'll talk about the let's see what I'll talk about. Oh, gift giving. There was a museum that talked about gifts. I had an episode of Environmental Soup from a while ago. I think last year, and I have it on YouTube. So I might play a portion of it, and I'll just find it. I might not play it on in this video. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'll link the video. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day if you're leaving